Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 236 of the Book Cougars, two middle-aged women on the hunt for a good read. I'm Emily.
And I'm Chris.
We are together again for the first time in weeks, it feels like, across the table from each other.
Yes, it's so good to be back here at Book Cougars headquarters in Connecticut.
So nice to have you. We have one thank you.
Yes, big thanks to Sharon, who sent a lovely donation our way.
And is a new listener. Welcome to the podcast, Sharon. You have 236 episodes to get caught up on. We're so happy to have you as a listener.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for your kindness. You know what? I wanted to just have a little follow-up from the last episode when I was talking about Annie Dillard's audiobook that I listened to, The Writing Life. I just wanted to clarify that she talks about two things. She talks about not holding back when you're drafting a piece of writing, but then to cut the umbilical cord when you're editing. So I just wanted to clarify that because it sounds like contradictory advice, but it is at different points in the writing process. Like when you're drafting, you like to let it all hang out, let every thought that comes to mind, you know, like don't save anything, don't hold back.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a version of self-editing like we talked about, but in a different way. It's like you're not even letting yourself do the writing, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Cool.
So what are you currently reading, Emily?
I am reading Memorial Days by Geraldine Brooks. I went to the library to search for books that come in around 200 pages. There's a reason why, we'll tell you in upcoming jaunts. And I came across this one in that quick pick section, which is a 14-day loan. And I forgot about this book that I wanted to read it. And this is Geraldine Brooks' memoir about when her husband, Tony Horowitz, dies very unexpectedly. I mean, he literally passes out on the streets in Washington, D.C. It goes back and forth in time. She and Tony settled in Martha's Vineyard. So it starts in West Tisbury, which is a town in Martha's Vineyard, the day that she gets the call, which is Memorial Day weekend in 2019, which is why the book is called Memorial Days. And then she starts going forward to where she is now, which is more in the early 2000s. So the early 2020s, I guess is a better way to say it, where she's had some time to digest his loss and is really having a chance to grieve. I would say it's somewhat similar to Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking, except she doesn't do all the name dropping that Joan Didion tends to do, or tended. Poor Joan, she's passed away now. But I'm really enjoying it. And I also got the audiobook, which she narrates. She's from Australia, so she has that great Aussie accent. So, Memorial Days, Geraldine Brooks. I wasn't expecting to read it, but I'm really enjoying her writing. And I thought of you, Chris, because I know you loved her book, The People of the Book. But her most recent book is Horse, and that's the book she was working on when he passed away. So then she ends up publishing that book and going on book tour and all of that, and she just hasn't had a chance to grieve, and that's what this book, Memorial Days, is about.
Well, I'm reading an old favorite, The Shining by Stephen King, which qualifies for our Ghost Story Bingo card and also Sue's Big Book Summer Reading Challenge. I'm reading a mass market copy that comes in at 659 pages. I'm at, what am I on? As of last night, I'm on page 257. It's so good. And this is my third time reading it. I read it as a teenager and enjoyed it for certain aspects. I read it in my 40s for other aspects. So now I just feel like I'm visiting an old friend, a really creepy old friend. And I started reading it in Red Cloud, Nebraska at the Hotel Garber, which is a brand new boutique hotel. The hotel is new, but the building was built in 1910, where some of the history of the hotel in The Shining was set. I remembered thinking, like, we're going to be talking about the Good House later in this episode because it was our second quarter read along. And it's interesting to be reading about ghosts and hauntings and how writers kick off right from the start with like scary stuff. But Stephen King has a way of really kind of slowly turning up the dial.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And there are things I forgot completely about characters in this novel. So I'm loving this so much. The Shining by Stephen King. Highly recommend it. I know Stephen King, I believe he wrote the screenplay for the film that Jack Nicholson starred in, which was really, quite a blockbuster when it first came out. But I don't think Stephen King liked that adaptation.
He didn't. I've seen interviews about that. I think he and the director had a falling out about it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't watch the movie, read the book, and then maybe watch the movie.
You've seen the movie though, right?
I have, yeah.
And did you like it?
Yeah, I thought it was okay. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I only saw it once in the theaters when it came out. And probably back then I was a bit of a purist and I didn't like it when movie adaptations strayed from the novel.
Yeah.
Now I think I have a little bit more nuanced understanding of artistic creation and visions, and that you do have to change certain things for movies or they could be 12 hours long.
Right.
Yeah. I think what I liked about the movie is I'll never forget the opening scene where it's following a car driving through the mountains, which is just beautiful. And then, of course, the hotel. So it does give you nice visuals.
Yeah.
So what have you just read?
I finished a book called Finding Grace, which is a debut novel by Loretta Rothschild. And it is about a woman who's with her husband and her daughter at the Ritz-Carlton in France on Christmas Eve. And she's talking about her infertility and she desperately wants to have a second child. And this is one of those where the first sentence of the novel really catches you. Chapter 1. The last time we were at the Ritz in Paris, I had my 5th miscarriage at breakfast. That's a bit of a banger of a sentence. And I have to say, I was reading this on my e-reader at night, and she and her husband are fighting because he's like, why don't you enjoy the daughter we have now instead of focusing on wanting to have another baby? She was kind of all in on that thought, and she just couldn't let it go. It was eating her up. And they had had an egg donor and had the egg inseminated into a surrogate. And I was getting pretty close to the end of chapter 1, and I was like, I don't think this book's going to work for me. And then something happened at the end of chapter 1. I was laying in bed and I literally said, oh my God, what just happened? And the gentleman caller looked at me and I said, this book just went in a completely different direction than I expected. And that is all I'm going to say, because I do not want to give anything away, except that it ended up being a ghost story, which I was not expecting at all.
Excellent.
So it also gave me a chance to mark something off on my bingo card. I really enjoyed the story. It did not go where I expected. And this arc that we have, the cover is cut out so that you can see this blurb on the edge. And it says, one of the best books I've read this year by Jodi Picoult. That's high praise. And it's blurbed by all sorts of people. And I would say it is definitely going to be a book I don't forget. Very memorable.
Very cool. Now, is that a debut or?
It's a debut.
Wow.
Yeah, debut novel. Loretta Rothschild.
Well, I read another old favorite, The Professor's House by Willa Cather. I read this for Colleen's year of reading all of Cather's novels, and also for going to the 70th annual Willa Cather Spring Conference in Red Cloud, Nebraska that I just got back from. And I really enjoyed this novel. I think my feelings for it have changed over the years. But the one thing that always stays the same is that I think it's an excellent depiction of what it's like to be depressed. Because the professor, the titular character, is depressed. And you kind of find out why. What was interesting was this book is just turned 100 years old. It was published in 1925. So 2025, it was the featured book at this conference celebrating its centennial. So there were a lot of panels that talked about this book. Pretty much every paper that was delivered mentioned it in some capacity. Some really focused on it. And one that focused on it was Mystery Harwood. Her talk was about ghost lore. She's a folklorist. And she talked about ghost lore, specifically like the ghost friend tale and how that works. And she referred to this book, The Professor's House, as a ghostless ghost story, which I loved. Really, really great paper. And one of those that I'm like, damn, now I have to reread it again. I might wait for a while on that, but really enjoyed it. And if you're looking for a short book. It's a campus novel in some ways. There's not a lot of scenes on campus, but he is a professor. And another paper talked about how John Williams' book Stoner was written in response to this in some ways, because Williams was a big fan of Cather, and he had the professor's house in mind when he was writing Stoner. And then also Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse, I think it was the one novel. I think it was the novel that was mentioned as also being a response to the professor's house. So more to come on that. I haven't read a lot of Virginia Woolf. I tend to like her nonfiction more than her novels, but To the Lighthouse is the next novel of hers that I plan to read, which I've been planning to read for, 12 years, but I will get to it.
Well, you have the next 12 or more. The one thing I did want to say about Finding Grace, I'm sorry that I forgot to say, it surprised me that it was a ghost story because it ends up being told. I'm not exactly sure, Chris, you might know this more with your English background, that it's like an omniscient person who's died, who's telling the story in the vein of like The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. The Lovely Bones was with a 14-year-old who'd been murdered, and then the story is being told by her as she's watching her family after she's died. And I would say that this story is reminiscent of that, and that's why I called it a ghost story.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, that is in line with in the professor's house. So he's an older professor. He's 52. He's not that old anymore. When I was younger, he was older. But so he's kind of at the height of his career. He's finished this series of books on Spanish adventurers that's won a great award. His family has gotten wealthy suddenly due to an invention that was commercialized. The invention was created by his student, who he was very fond of, who died in World War I. Tom Outland is his name. So his ghost kind of haunts the professor and the entire family. It's not a real ghost. It's just his memory, his presence, which is very much in the novel. But you can have a non-ghost ghost within the novel.
Yeah.
And you almost wait for it, the ghost to come, but it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But, there's so many different levels of ghosts as we're finding. I mean, from the traditional scary ghost story to these more philosophical, psychological, heart pain filled stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the ones where you feel something touch you, the creepy ones, and then the ones, that are more omniscient and around. Well, I read The Bookstore Family by Alice Hoffman. This is the 4th book in the Bookstore series, and this is an Amazon original, so you can listen to it on Audible or through your Kindle as an e-read. It's poignant. The daughter, Violet, is now off the island of Maine, which is the focus of all of these books. There is a bookstore cafe in Maine, but Violet has left. She's living in France and she's baking, but her pastries aren't quite right. And she meets a young chap that you get the sense that they might be starting to fall in love. And then she is called back to Maine because her mother is not doing well. And in classic Alice Hoffman-esque, is that the way to say it? It's got a little bit of flowers and pastries that make a difference in people's lives. And it's only 40 pages, but it's a beautiful little poignant story. And I just love her writing. I mean, I think some people might read this one and be like, nothing really happens. But that was okay with me. I thought it was really light about love and following your heart, I would say. And with also a thread of cancer and grief and part of why one should live their life to the fullest if given the opportunity. Again, it's called The Bookstore Family, and this is the 4th in the Bookstore series. I'm not sure if there's going to be more. I didn't do any research about that.
All right. Well, I finished an audiobook, Still Writing, The Perils and Pleasures of a Creative Life by Dani Shapiro, and I really enjoyed it. Like I said in the last episode, I like her voice. Mm-hmm. Her voice is very pleasant to listen to, and she keeps kind of the same tone. There's not a lot of variations and ups and downs. I do want to still get a hard copy of this. There's a lot of really wonderful inspiration in this book. She tells stories of her own writing experience from when she was an early writer to more recently, and lessons she's learned about a variety of things, but, protecting your writing time, your writing life, and just the ups and downs of it. And at the end of it, she actually has a couple meditations to do to help with your writing. In the audiobook, she's setting up the meditation, and then you have the music or the gong. So I'm interested to see how that looks in the book, the paper book itself. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I'd recommend it to anyone who wants to live a creative life. It doesn't have to necessarily just be about writing. Living an intentional life the way you want to live it with your creative outlet. We're all creative.
Mm-hmm. It's a good thing to think about. I remember reading an interview where she said she is a ritualistic writer, that before she sits down to write, she has very specific rituals. Like I think she lights a candle and she does, maybe it is that meditation. So that's interesting that she ended the book with that. Mm-hmm. And I can see where that would bookend, if you do carve out time for your writing, that's a way to bookend the way you're going to do it. Like I am now stepping into this part of my life. Here's the candle, here's the gong.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of writers do that. Like Hemingway would sharpen his pencils. I think it gets you ready, like your body, like the whole somatic experience of it, and I think your body, your mind, your soul, it's all connected. And I think that once you establish that, it's just a way to go, here I am.
Yeah. And maybe I'll download that. I like the idea of listening to her. She does have a beautiful voice.
Yeah. So again, that was Still Writing by Dani Shapiro.
I finished my first big book of the summer, The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. I do have a hard copy, but I mostly listened to this. And it was narrated by James Aaron O. It comes in just over 400 pages. I think it's 416 pages. And it is about Hai, who lives in East Gladness, Connecticut. At the very opening of the book, literally the first sentence, he is contemplating jumping off of a bridge. And he hears a voice. And the voice is this woman named Grazina, who is an elderly woman who is out dealing with her laundry and calls to him and ends up bringing him into the fold, and they share a life together. They're both helping each other. He is struggling with having not been truthful with his mother, who is an immigrant from Vietnam. They are both immigrants from Vietnam in the novel, which is autobiographical of Ocean's real life. And he has lied to her and told her that he is somewhere else, where in truth he had checked himself into rehab and was trying to beat an addiction to drugs. One of the things that's interesting, I felt like, in this novel is there's a character that really shows how this drug dealer, who they called the Candy Man, really groomed children by just giving them literal candy when they would come off the bus when they were young children. And then when they got to be kind of middle school age, it was a different kind of candy that they were paying for, So that was an interesting part of the novel, very small part of the novel. But what he really does in this novel so effectively is talk about these other families that you end up becoming involved with, sometimes through your work or sometimes through a situation like this where he just met Grazina and they end up caring for each other. He also works at a place called Home Market, which is a play on the Boston market, which is where Ocean really did work when he was a younger person. And what he calls it, I read this in one of his interviews, circumstantial family. People who you end up becoming family with based on circumstance. And in this case, it's you're working together. And it's this cast of characters that you would never meet in your everyday life, except that you're working at Home Market trying to get food out to people, and that in his experience, Ocean's experience, and in what you experience in this novel, this circumstantial family will end up doing anything for you. And they don't have to, but they will. And so the novel takes off where some of these different characters are trying to accomplish different things, and their circumstantial family ends up helping them. And then Grazina's actual family steps into the story as well. It is a beautiful novel. His writing is so gorgeous. As I was driving over to headquarters, I was thinking, I would actually call this an epic. But then I thought, well, epics in my mind usually cover this epic period of time or something, like a family across generations. It's not. I want to say I don't even know if it covers the 6-month period. I never really sat down to figure out the length of time, but it felt really epic to me for some reason. Mm. Do you have a feeling of like what that term means for books?
That's a really good question, Emily. I'm sitting here thinking about epics, of course, like the Odyssey, those traditional ones. That was decades. But I think you got that feeling, though, that you have gone through something major and there's big transformation. So I think that's what I think when I think of epic, I suppose.
Yeah, I'll have to think about it a little bit. I mean, that's a word that came to me just as I was driving over here, and I just loved it so much. And I do recommend the narration. I thought James Aaron O did a great job. And I almost, when I turned to the novel, the book, I should say, in my hands, I was like, I kind of like being told this story. I'm enjoying it that way.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I just Googled epic definition. And according to the New Oxford American Dictionary, they say a long poem, typically one derived from ancient oral tradition, narrating the deeds and adventures of heroic or legendary figures or the history of a nation. And I think, obviously that's a classic. We're looking at epic poetry. But I think that's the thing, though, right? That it's an adventure in legendary deeds. Those are like legendary relationships from what it seems like you're describing.
Yeah, and they do end up going on a little road trip. So, I mean, it might totally not be the right word, but that is what came to me as I was driving over. I know some of our listeners are reading it now. I've seen you all on Goodreads. So let me know what you think of your experience reading it. Again, it's called The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong, and it's a perfect one for Big Book Summer.
Nice. This episode is sponsored by
Forget the Fairy Tale and Find Your Happiness by Deb Miller. Your life is not your mother's fairy tale, and thank goodness. Forget the Fairy Tale and Find Your Happiness is Deb Miller's smart, sassy memoir about ditching outdated scripts and building a life that actually fits. With a wink at Disney princesses and a nod to real-world reinvention, it's funny, fierce, and unapologetically empowering. Jill Zarin raves, every woman should read this. For fans of Lessons in Chemistry and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, order now. Check the show notes for links. So, Chris, Biblio Adventures.
Yes. Oh, my gosh. It's been a great beginning of summer for Biblio Adventures. The last we talked, I was in Pittsburgh getting ready to leave to the last leg back to Connecticut. And I was finishing up Danny Shapiro's book. But before I hit play, I drove over to see a home that Cather had lived in Pittsburgh, the McClung House, which she lived in for about 5 years with her friend Isabel. Isabel's dad was a big judge in town, very wealthy. So this home is on a corner. It's a very large, it's considered a mansion back then. It has a 3-car garage. The street still has the wonderful cobblestone out front. So it was rainy. It's a private home. So, probably take a picture, but you don't want to go knocking on the door necessarily.
Walking around the grounds.
Yeah. So that was neat to see. So another Cather notch in my belt there.
Well, whilst you were away, I went to the Wesleyan RJ Julia Pride Day. They were celebrating Pride. According to Rachel, it's the biggest Pride celebration in the state of Connecticut. And they were having a drag artist story time. So we went in with Nina. This one was downstairs, that downstairs area where they do events. It was packed, Chris. It was so nice to see. And then these 2 delightful drag artists came in. One had her hair done like the braids of Pippi Longstocking sticking straight out. And then the other one had this beautiful like bouffant wig. And they both read a book and they really engaged the kids. And in between reading, they sang songs like the drag queens on the bus to the tune of the wheels on the bus. So their heels went clack, 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 clack,
cute.
clack, clack. I have the cutest video of Nina. Nina's big trick right now, my granddaughter Nina, is clapping. So if she gets around people that are clapping, she's like, oh my God, everyone knows my secret talent, So she loves to join in the clapping. It was just a delight. It was so fun to see all of these kids having a good time and to see these two drag artists kicking off the day, because it was kind of the start of the day of events, and then the parade and all of that.
That's so cool. Yeah, I saw your pictures or Rachel's pictures. I don't remember who posted them, but yeah, huge crowd. That was great to see.
Yeah. Giant.
And for new listeners, Nina is, what is she, like 10 months old now?
She's 11 months. She's almost a year, which seems, crazy stupid to me that a year's passed. But yes, and she loves books. Thank gracious.
Yes. Well, I was on a big trip. I went with our listener, Colleen, who's been on the podcast a couple times. She was a bit of our roving Biblio Adventure reporter a couple times. And we were going to the Cather conference in Red Cloud, Nebraska. But we took a couple extra days. She's in Chicago and I'm in Connecticut. We met in Omaha, hopped in the rental car and went down to Abilene, Kansas, was our first stop, where we saw the Eisenhower Presidential Museum and Library and Eisenhower's Boyhood Home. And wonderful experience. Apparently, they've renovated it all in recent years. This was established in the 60s, if memory serves me correctly. And it's a wonderful campus area. They actually closed off some streets. The Boyhood Home has not been moved. That's where his Boyhood Home was. But 2 streets have been altered to make space for this campus. So you have the visitor center where there's a lovely bookstore, gift shop, and they show a film about Eisenhower's life. And then beyond that, on one side, there's the big museum building. And then across from the museum is a building kind of matching that. That is the library, the archives and library of Eisenhower. And then there's also a statue and a veterans memorial. It's a really lovely campus. It was kind of cold and rainy when we were there, so we didn't spend a lot of time outside exploring. But the museum, oh my gosh, it's a fantastic museum. Excellent. We had to kind of hurry. At one point, we realized, like, oh my gosh, our tour at the Boyhood Home is starting soon. So the last maybe quarter got a little less eyeball time from us, but really wonderful. Walking through his life and experiences from growing up in Kansas and Abilene to joining the military, meeting his wife, their life together, becoming a general, becoming the president, and beyond. So really fantastic museum. It's interesting. Colleen and I talked a lot because the video that they showed of his life, it's the great man who did this on his own. Like no other man could have done it. It's kind of challenging. We talked a lot about like, how do you construct a narrative that doesn't necessarily do that? That is a little bit more complex. Really fun conversation. It's nice to see things like that with somebody to bounce those thoughts around. And I bought a book there, Looking for the Good War, American Amnesia and the Violent Pursuit of Happiness. This is by Elizabeth D. Samet. And I read another book by her called Soldier's Heart, Reading Literature Through Peace and War at West Point. I probably read that prior to the podcast, but she is an English professor at West Point. And I saw her name more than anything, and that's why I grabbed this book and look forward to it. She really looks at all of, like literature and movies and pop culture during that time period, World War II.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And then we stayed in a house. Well, Colleen had this house for the whole time, the week, and I stayed there just for a night. But it was in a town called Burr Oak, Kansas, just really across the border from Nebraska, really, really close. And I'm reading The Professor's House, right, when we're there. And The Professor's House, the thing about him is he has his old house that he loves with his dusty old study upstairs, where the dress forms are also kept by the seamstress who comes every year to make dresses for his wife and daughters. And he loves these dress forms. Like they're his girls, they're his women. And I'm walking around the rental house, just kind of looking at all the rooms. And wouldn't you know, part of the decor, there was a dress form. I was like, what are the chances of that? So that was fun.
Yeah, nice tie-in.
Yeah, that was wonderful. So the main focus was the 70th annual Willa Cather Spring Conference that they have every year. It's annual. Fantastic conference. I mean, just really well done. We did a tour, a 7-building tour through the center the day before the conference started. So you go to Willa Cather Childhood Home and other buildings associated with her life, like the church and the bank, a lot of different buildings. That was really cool. And then the conference itself was held in the Opera House. And we've talked about like small town opera houses from the late 19th century. They're not opera houses. They're performing spaces where the town can gather. Traveling shows would come through and perform there. So all of the papers that were delivered, all the sessions were in that opera house in the main auditorium there, which was really great. So you didn't have to pick and choose which session to go to, which is sometimes the hardest part of being at a conference, because you're like, oh my God, there's 2 papers that I'm dying to listen to, and they're at the same time.
FOMO. Yeah. It's so
real
hard.
Yeah. So that was a really cool aspect of it. And it was nice for everybody to be there together. And I think somebody said there were about 200 attendees. And it varies because every other year they have the International Cather Seminar, and that's also in June. So I think on years when it's not an international seminar year, there's more attendees for the spring conference. And this year, that international seminar is in Milwaukee. But still, I mean, really well attended, and I had a great time. Red Cloud itself has changed so much since I've been going there. The first time I went was in the early mid-90s. I stayed at a place, as I mentioned before, called Hotel Garber, which just recently opened. It wasn't always a hotel. It was originally built as a business space. It's been apartments. In the 60s, the top floor burnt off. So with this restoration, they've re-added that 3rd floor and restored the building and created this wonderful boutique hotel. And I have to give a shout out to Brandy, who is the manager on duty that weekend. She was fantastic. She was the most helpful employee manager and just a wonderful, friendly person, as is basically everybody in Red Cloud. The bowling alley reopened with a wonderful restaurant inside. Yeah, had a really good time.
They've been doing a lot of renovations of buildings there. When we had Ashley Olson on a long time ago, we'll put a link in the show notes to the episode she was a part of. She was talking a lot about the renovations that were taking place. So how fun for you to be able to go and actually see the finished products.
Yeah, they're doing so much. The Pavelka homestead has been completely renovated, and that's the setting for My Antonia. That's where Annie Pavelka, who was the model for My Antonia, actually lived and everything. So, and we got to see J.P. Cather's burial site. He's buried in Bladen, Nebraska, which is just up the road from Red Cloud. And he was the model for Claude in one of ours, her Pulitzer Prize winning novel. So we just had a really good time. Colleen and some other people have formed a Cather Curious group, an informal group of people who were there who were kind of getting into Cather, not really sure, because she bonded with a woman named Nancy that first night at that dinner, who was kind of like, yeah, I came with a friend and I'm checking it out. So that was kind of fun.
Nice. Open to everybody at all levels of Catherhood.
Oh, absolutely. And it's for scholars and fans of Cather. Mm-hmm. The spring conference is so welcoming, as is the international seminar. It's just a friendly group of people, even if you don't always agree with their interpretations, because that's another conversation that we had. Colleen was really surprised by the amount of people who thought The Professor's House was a depressing novel and that it has a depressing ending, because she does not see it that way. So we've both reread the ending like 3 or 4 times to have conversations about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I just recommend to everyone, like, if there's an author that you like, really dig into their work. You know, if it's somebody who has a foundation or an organization, join that organization and just really go to town. Mm-hmm. I think it's really fun to see how people interpret novels, how they look at them together, a person's whole work together, because it's just really grand. Oh, and I got to spend some time in the archives there, too. That was one of the things. You could sign up for time in the archives. So I got to hold and look through the address book, Cather's address book, and her ledger that I had done the internship on a couple years ago when I was in library school. So that was really fun.
How fun.
Yeah.
Well,
really
I also like how when you were saying, become a completist, read everything. learn, join societies, whatever's out there. But also I love, like when you were talking earlier, the web of learning about the books that were influenced by this author. So like Stoner and To the Lighthouse. And you could really make this web also of reading other books that were impacted by Cather.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because you see more writers today who mention her in their books or interviews as like, you know, she's somebody who's influenced me. And then you could go backwards in the other direction too and like look at the books that the writer you're interested in, what books did they read that helped them develop?
Yeah.
Joining those organizations that really every literary organization could use support. Mm-hmm. It helps keep that writer's reputation alive and discoverable for new readers coming to their work. After that, after the conference ended, we headed to Omaha and we had a nice walk around. We stumbled across a little free library. We went into an emporium that supposedly had books, and it did. Not supposedly, it did have some books. A lot of like fantasy and sci-fi, but then some other things mixed in, kids' books as well. But they had a whole Stephen King section because it's one of these stores that has all of these knick-knack, fan-themed, gothic things. Just, it's hard to describe, just loaded with stuff. So that was fun. I didn't buy any Stephen King. I came close, but I thought, you know, maybe I should read the one I'm reading first. And then at the airport, too, like his latest, which is a bestseller already. And on the way to Omaha, we did cruise past Beth Streeter Aldrich's house. She's a writer also originally from Iowa, but is associated with Nebraska, where she lived most of her adult life. Her most well-known book is A Lantern in Her Hand. So we didn't have time to stop in, but it was nice to see it because, you know, it was on the way. Just a little diversion to see that.
Well, while you were away, I had a much closer to home biblio adventure, but did require me to get in the car and drive over the Tappan Zee Bridge. I was running an errand for my son, Jacob, down in New Jersey. And so on the way back, I thought, oh, I'm going to stop in Nyack, one of our favorite little towns. And the last time I was there, it was with you and our friend and listener, Kate, to go see Carson McCullers' house. And we had read a short story, and Kate had read the new biography of McCullers. So I missed you two very much. But I did get a chance to stop at Big Red Books, which is a bookstore that had just opened up within 6 months of us being there last year. And when I got there, the owner, Richie, recognized me from, you know, because we follow each other on social media. And I mean, I should say he follows the Cougs on social media. And I said, wow, when we were here last time, you had kind of just opened. And he said, yeah, we had. And I asked how it's going. He said, it's going great. Ruth Franklin's going to be there maybe this week. They have a lot of events. So if you live near Nyack, I would recommend that you look up their event schedule. And it's just a beautiful store. The sun was streaming through at the time, and I bought two things, and both of them were, what do you call that in bookstores when they're front facing?
Faced out.
Yeah, faced out. He got me. One of the books I bought, he was like, I just put that on the shelf. It's called Body Work, The Radical Power of Personal Narrative by Melissa Phoebos. And I picked this up partly because the bright yellow cover and there's like an image of a body. And I started reading it and just fell right into it. And one of the things she said really early on is, while I sometimes resist the work of writing, I resist my own psychic suffering more. And writing has become for me a primary means of digesting and integrating my experiences and thereby reducing the pains of living, or if not, at least making them useful to myself and to others. There is no pain in my life that has not been given value by the alchemy of creative attention. I just loved that. So I'm really looking forward to digging into this more. And then the other book that caught my attention, and the owner, Richie, is a writer, and I know he's a poet, so there was lots of poetry. But this one is called Poems of Parenting. And it, too, was like right out in front, right when you walked in the door. And this is by Lauren Brantz. And there's a baby dancing around a woman who's laying flat on the ground, exhausted. And when I opened it, the dedication is, for Ronan, who deprived me of so much sleep, I lost my mind and couldn't stop writing poetry. And there's a chapter called Three-Nager, which I thought was hilarious. And then I'm just going to read you one very quick poem. Warm Jammies. I never gave much thought to what it would be like if a rabid raccoon was dipped in oil and I had to dress it in a 3-piece suit until I tried to put warm jammies on you. It's just a fun little silly book, and this is going to be Jacob's Father's Day gift, my son Jacob.
Perfect.
He loves poems. So I did very well at that store, and then I walked down the street to the Nyack Public Library, which the three of us spent time in when we were together last time, and they have a great little store of books that you can shop at in the basement. So I went down there, and I found two I couldn't resist. Thinking in Pictures and Other Reports from My Life with Autism by Temple Grandin. And it's signed by Temple Grandin. It's a nice hardcover. I've been wanting to read this. I found out that Betsy Lerner edited this book. Betsy Lerner is the person I talked about last episode, or an episode or two ago, and many episodes ago when I read her novel, Shred Sisters. And then this one caught my eye, American Knees, a novel by Sean Wong. Kind of looks like legs in fishnet stockings.
I was going to say it looks like a math book.
And it also looks like a math book. And it's blurbed, finally, we have racial issues made racy. And that's by blurbed by Gish Jen. And it is a romance. I also loved that the author's wife said that he finally wrote a book she was interested in reading.
That's funny.
So I'm looking forward to digging into both of those. It was a really nice stop. I really love Nyack, and it was nice to stretch my legs and walk around. And then
That's so cool.
go home.
That's so cool. You made me realize, too, also at the National Willa Cather Center, they have a bookstore. It's mostly new books by or about Cather or related to their programming, because they do have author visits and author events. But they also have a small used section of books related to Cather. So I did buy a new edition of Death Comes for the Archbishop, her book, because I love the cover.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love the cover. It's kind of like a real thick, oily, abstract painting of southwestern landscape. And the introduction is by Kali Fajardo Anstein. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, but I really liked her introduction. I kind of read it on a preview, but I needed a new fresh copy that wasn't marked up. And then for used books, I found Miss Marissa, Doctor of the Gold Trail. This is by Marie Sandoz, who is a Nebraska writer. I've read several of her books. And this is about a woman doctor in the Nebraska frontier in the 1870s. I got a book called Chrysalis, Willa Cather in Pittsburgh, 1896 to 1906. And then the collected short fiction of Willa Cather. So I asked Laura, I was like, hey, Laura, she wasn't with me, so I texted her and said, you know, if you're home and you're free, can you do me a favor and snap a photo of the second and third shelf down on the bookshelf next to my desk? Because those are my Cather books, right? Yeah. So she snapped a picture. I was like, great, thank you so much. Because I was like, I don't think I have this. Well, I wanted this book. It's a hardcover, and it's a former library book from the Plattsmouth Public Library, which has an association for me personally. So I bought it. And then when I got home, I realized, right underneath those two Cather shelves is a shelf of Edith Wharton, but then another shelf of Cather that I forgot I had. I already have a copy of this, but that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
she forgot about a shelf of her Cather, folks. Can you imagine?
I really need to reorganize my books. What I was trying to do too is like, I cleared out my library thing account. I took all the books off, and I was starting to just use it just for my Cather books, because I thought that will be a good place for me to catalog those and to know what I have. Well, I think I've only done like 10 books so far, so I need to get on that. So
good summer project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our next Biblio adventure is one that we had with a bunch of listeners. Thanks to everyone who joined us for our second quarter read-along discussion of The Good House by Tananarive Due just this last weekend.
Yes, we have wonderful listeners, wonderful readers. Mm-hmm. This book was very confusing to me. I'm just going to say from the start, and I thought for sure it had to do with me. And, you know, I was in the middle of a grant cycle. I'm like, you're just not giving this book enough Do. Ha ha. Well, no, it turns out that this was a fantastic conversation, in part because a lot of people were confused about what happened in this novel.
Yes, it was very confusing. The writer was trying to do a lot, and this is one of her earlier novels. So part of me was thinking it's just she didn't maybe have the skill set yet to pull it off, and it could have been edited a little bit better.
Yeah.
So back to the Willa Cather conference again, the main speaker was Jane Smiley, who talked about Cather and also writing. And one of the things she said is that a writer, you want complexity. And she's talking about when a writer is older and the complexity that they can deliver in a novel, usually emotional complexity. She's like, that's good. She's like, but you can't have complexity about everything. You can't have complexity about the characters, complexity about the plot, complexity with the writing, because you lose the reader. And I think I was thinking about The Good House when she said that, because I was like, right? I was like, there was just too much going on. And it was even hard to hang on to some of the characters sometimes.
100%.
Yeah.
I struggled with that. And then timeline. Mm-hmm. The two hardest parts for me were the characters and the timeline, because it kept moving back and forth and doing backstory in strange ways. And then the ending was very confusing.
Yeah. This is a read-along discussion, so there might be a little bit of spoilers, but we won't spoil the ending because we don't want to be mean in that way.
And because we kind of didn't understand it.
Well, for me, yeah, the ending, I got frustrated reading this book. Like, I actually got a little angry because I was like, oh, come on already. Because I felt like some of the back and forth was repetitious. Mm-hmm. And it was a little too like, I'm suffering through reading this. And I do want to find out what happens. Because I really enjoyed the beginning part. I thought there was some really good tension building. Yeah. I wanted to know what's going to happen. But then it just started getting a little frustrating in the middle. That picked up a lot towards the end, and you then see how things are connected. But I also feel like, I felt like some parts could have been more developed and others like kill some of this repetition to build up other parts. Because Deuce says at the end of the book in her author note that she's like, I intended The Good House to be a story about the consequences of abusing magic. And I wanted to base that magical system within Black traditions, which is why I chose voodoo, but this is not a voodoo book. And when I read that, I remember you saying that you saw an interview with her saying, this is not a haunted house story. And I thought, well, but you're trying to do these two things, like just from the title, the cover, the setup early on, it seems like there needed more streamlining with everything.
Yeah. And actually, that wasn't me that said that. That was Melissa, one of our listeners.
Okay.
Yeah. And she said she saw an interview where she said this is not a haunted house story. And people, particularly because the cover, it's called The Good House, and it has this creepy house on the cover, it's a possession story is what she said. And so people often are misled by the novel. But I mean, it was a haunted house, and there were people who were possessed.
Right. Yeah. And possession, I mean, one of the things that somebody said recently is that a possessed person, you're possessed by a ghost, the demon in this case, who is a ghost. And that was
a Baka.
Yeah. Who was named Becca. So that was really funny. So that it's a little bit of a spoiler. We won't say who she's connected with and looks like, but there's a quote. If you've read the book, you'll understand this quote. And if you haven't, I don't think it's a spoiler, but this is the quote. The girl in the mirror was the ghost of a woman who had yet to die. An echo. I was like, oh, and I just reread that this morning. I wish I would have had that in my mind when we had the discussion, because it would have clarified some things in the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we even want to give a synopsis of this book because it's very long and it's very complicated. But I will say it starts with a prologue. And the one thing I was reminded about with prologues is that oftentimes I do think it's helpful when you finish a book to go back and read the prologue. So several listeners that were in the conversation with us said they had done that. And Aunt Ellen gets mad props for reading it twice.
Twice, I know.
Which I have to say, that was my reaction. When I got to the end, I thought, if this wasn't 500 pages, I would turn back to the first page and read it again because I didn't really get it. Because these propulsive novels too. It's like you want to see what happens.
Right.
And I think if I'd gone back and reread it, I probably would have caught maybe some Easter eggs or something along the way, you know. It starts with a prologue that's in 1929 in Sacagawea, Washington, which is where this house resides. And then when the prologue is over, you skip to 2001, 72 years later, when Angela Toussaint is there for a 4th of July party. And she is the granddaughter of the woman in the prologue. So the story starts to complicate from there. Something tragic happens at this 4th of July party. And then around page 40, I think, or 50, it's 2 years after this tragedy, and Angela Toussaint has come back to this house again, and the story kind of takes off from there. I think that's a good way to position you a little bit about what happens.
Yeah. Now, would you recommend this novel?
No.
Okay. I don't think I would either.
Yeah.
And I wish Dew would revise it.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, I know not a lot of writers go back and do that, but I think with the writing chops she has now, it would be really cool to see what she would do with this story. Because I think it's a really good story.
I agree. I mean, I think the concept of it is really good. She is taking on racism with it. And maybe even now with all the writing she's done, she would look at that differently. I did hear an interview with her in the prologue. The grandmother, Marie Toussaint, is married to a Native American man. And I saw an interview with Dew that said she would treat that differently now. Because this was written in the early 2000s, right? 2003, it was published. So who knows when she wrote it.
Yeah, there's some homophobia in here used different ways. Like some of the homophobic things are said by the bad guy. I'll just leave it at that. So you know he's a bad guy. But there's these gay rape fantasies. There's also another character who has pedophilic thoughts with his wife. And then just some general homophobic nonsense here and there. But I don't know if that's the time period or how she would deal with that now. But there was actually a real bookstore that she uses in two of the scenes, Marcus Bookstore. And this is the description of it. It blended into the gray, downtrodden buildings around it. Skeletons of better days at the corner of 39th Street on MLK. So it's kind of cool to see a real bookstore. Not that I've been there, but I know. I think it was one of our listeners was there.
And one of the people in our Zoom conversation said it had the potential to be creepy, but it wasn't. And I think it started creepy for me, and then it was kind of a letdown. To answer your question, no, I wouldn't recommend it. I'm glad I read it. I do think that Melissa and some other people said they read The Reformatory, which I think is her most recent novel and is getting rave reviews. So I think she is someone. I mean, even this book, the blurb on the front says, a haunting tale from a writer who grows better with every book. Now it's from Publishers Weekly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
We also got an email from Robin L. She gave us some thoughts on the book. You know, she had some issues with it, but that she would definitely try another novel by Tananarive Due, which I will too.
Yeah, agreed.
So thank you to everyone who stuck with us and read this big book.
Yes.
And to those of you who didn't finish it, we completely understand.
Totally. Yeah.
This episode is sponsored by
All This Can Be True by Jen Michalski. When Lacey's husband Derek has a stroke at 47 and falls into a coma, her plans, asking for a divorce, going back to school, and starting over, come to a screeching halt. But then she meets Quinn in the halls of the hospital. Lacey thinks she's discovered in Quinn the life she's always wanted, but Quinn harbors a secret that connects her to Derek. And if Derek wakes up, Quinn must come clean and risk destroying everything. All This Can Be True by Jen Michalski is available now. Check the show notes for links. Chris, do you have any upcoming jaunts?
I do. I'm going to be going to my first Bloomsday celebration on June 16th, which will be the day before this episode posts, I think. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm also signed up to attend an event through the New York Public Library on June 18th. And this is one that's in person at the main library or online, so I registered online. It is Super Gay Poems with Stephanie Burt and special guests. So I imagine it's part of their Pride Month programming and more poetry. Can never get enough poetry.
I just have my trip to Princeton, New Jersey coming up, and I want to thank people who have reached out and told me about fun things to do. So I'll be reporting back on episode 237. And then unfortunately, I can't go. It's a weekend I'm going to be out of town, but I did want to tell people that on June 21st, Middletown, Connecticut is having their Pages Book Festival. And they have some real heavy hitters coming, like Lisa Genova is going to be there. Sarah Moon is going to be there. So check out the schedule. We'll put a link in the show notes. It's all free. There are some writing workshops and all sorts of things.
Very cool. And then we have a joint Zoom event. Our Patreon salon for June is on the 22nd. And we will be discussing short novels this time, books that are 200 pages-ish or less. We thought it would be a nice foil/companion to the big book conversation that we had in May to kick off Sue's Big Book Summer Reading Challenge, but then also to have some options for small books to put in between those big books, because that is just nice. Like after you finish a mammoth book, like after reading The Good House, it was nice to pick up The Professor's House, which is a shorter novel.
Right. And I finished The Emperor of Gladness and picked up Memorial Days, which I don't even think is 200 pages. Yeah. So, yeah.
So that's on the 22nd, and that's for patrons at the $5 level and above. Come join us if you'd like to. If you're a patron, you automatically get the Zoom link the Friday before. If you're at the $5 level and above, you can upgrade for a month to come check it out if you want to do that. So we hope to see you there.
How about upcoming reads?
I'm going to be reading Silas Mariner by George Eliot. This is my next classic with Kate that I'm buddy reading. That's a fairly short novel, The Weight of Ink. That's going to be my next big book, and that is by Rachel Kadish, who people recommended The Weight of Ink to me because I loved The People of the Book by
Geraldine Brooks.
Right. So I'm looking forward to that. And then my Margaret Fuller reading summer group is going to be kicking off too later this month. And that is a 900-page book. We're going to be reading the new Library of America collected writings of Margaret Fuller, and we're going to be reading it late June through September. So if you're interested in joining the Margaret Fuller group, let me know. Send us an email, bookcougars@gmail.com, or reach out to me on Instagram, just at Chris Wallach, and I'd be happy to add you to the group when that gets started. We're going to be organizing through Instagram, but the conversations will be on Zoom.
Perfect.
How about you?
Well, I crowdsourced the last episode and at our reading salon, a Kristen Hanna. I had decided that I was going to read The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. And when my gentleman caller went to the library to pick it up, the librarian was hugging it and said, "This is the saddest book I've ever read." Several listeners have agreed. They've said, if you want to be sad all summer, you can read it. And one other one said, if you want to feel like you're walking through dirt all summer, read it. So I crowdsourced with listeners and my daughter, Rachel. I forgot. She's a huge Hannah fan. She's read all of her books. And two people, Rachel and listener Lorraine, both recommended The Great Alone, which is about an adventure in Alaska. Or I shouldn't say, I don't know if it's an adventure, but the story takes place in Alaska. Then I was behind a car with an Alaska license plate, and I was like, okay. So The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna is going to be my first. I'm going to get the audiobook and the book. And then I also have the new book by Jess Walter, So Far Gone. I loved his novel, Beautiful Ruins, and some other books of his. This is a contemporary novel. He's looking at politics, I think, from both sides. It's pretty short. It's around 250 pages, so I'll be digging into that. And then we have our Q3 read-along announcement.
Yes, indeed. And this one is going to have a companion read as well.
Should we start with the companion read?
Yes, the companion read is going to be The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And this is a late 19th century novel. It was published in 1892. It is a classic. and it's a psychological / ghost story maybe. We both love it. It's a novella length, so we figured it'd be okay to do a companion read because the third quarter read-along pick novel isn't all that long either.
It is not the length of The Good House.
It is not. Both of them together are not the length of The Good House.
This book comes in with a bibliography. It is a novel that has a bibliography at 280 pages.
Okay. And the title of our third quarter read-along pick is...
The Upstairs House by Julia Fine. This is no relation to Emily Fine. That I know, anyway. And this is a novel about a woman who has just had a baby and is having a lot of sleepless nights, and someone moves in upstairs. Margaret Weiss Brown, the author of the classic children's book Goodnight Moon.
So this book has some ghost action, we think. It has some lesbianism, we think. It has a writer connection, which is always fun. I love reading fiction or nonfiction about writers. I think it's always fun to do that. It has this connection, inspiration from the yellow wallpaper.
Yes, and it's readily available, which is always one of our goals. So it's available in library systems, both the novel, the hardcover novel, and the audiobook.
Yes.
It was published in 2021. Again, it's called The Upstairs House by Julia Fine. On the next episode, we will announce Zoom dates and all of those things. When this episode drops, we will open the Goodreads discussion thread. We look forward to reading this with you all.
Yes, this is Julia Fine's second novel. I have not read anything by her, but she has been shortlisted for like a Bram Stoker Award. So we thought that was a good sign.
Yes. And when we say things like we think, it's because, and I think we've talked about this in the past, we do not pre-read these books for our read-alongs. We want to be surprised in the unfolding of the story along with you, which is different than, what Oprah and Reese and Jenna do. Their books have been pre-read, whether by them or others, who knows? I'm sure it is by them. But we're excited to dig into this one with all of you.
Yeah, very much. And that's our read-along started with classics that we had both wanted to read but never got around to. And so we've kind of carried on that tradition by choosing books that we haven't read.
Yes.
Because we like that.
Exactly. All right, everyone. We wish you lots of happy reading.
Thanks for listening to the Book Cougars with Chris Wallach and Emily Fine. We'll be back again with another episode in 2 weeks. Until then, come chat with us on social media, Goodreads, or email us at bookcougars@gmail.com. If you'd like to help support our podcast, please tell others about us, leave a review wherever you listen, and consider becoming a patron. Even $1 a month is a big help. Learn more about that on our website, bookcougars.com, where you'll find the show notes for this and all of our past episodes.
Thanks, everybody.
This episode was edited by Pat Keogh Sound Design.